So what is it that most spiritual teachers won't tell you about opening your third eye? Well, it's this. It's all about prana, baby. Now, prana is essentially a spiritual form of energy that can be manipulated through breath. Prana does mean energy, and it can also mean breath in some of the scriptures. It's not quite one and the same, but they are very much interlinked. That's why we do a process of sadhana, sometimes in the yogic tradition called pranayama. These are essentially breathing practices. Prana means energy, as we've mentioned. Yama means control of. So controlling our energy, our life energy, and we do that through breath. So that's why the Wim Hof technique, these breathwork practices that were taken from the yogic tradition, are very powerful at creating high states of energy in the system, because that's what they're effectively designed to do. Now, it's very important actually that we've done a bit of yoga before we do our pranayama too, because they do very different things in the system. The yoga will work out the dense karmas, the physical asanas will work out the dense karmas in the body, and then the pranayama can come in with a finer energy to penetrate the nervous system even deeper. Now, also what they may not tell you is you don't want to create a goal out of opening your third eye. Again, it's another accessory to the path. If you're doing the right practices, it will open up in time. It takes time anyway, but you don't want to isolate this area and just train that. And the reason is because you'll become very, very unbalanced. And also, you'll probably be going at it egoically. What does this mean? Well, we might like the idea of the third eye because it seems to be the spiritual center of the soul, isn't it? It's certainly the seat of the mind. It's basically the control panel energetically in the whole system. But we also recognize that the third eye can breed some wonderful, natural, supernatural abilities inside of the system. We would call these in yoga siddhis, but siddhis translated basically means attainments or superpowers. And this is very interesting for somebody, perhaps a novice on the path, who wants to not abuse, because they're probably coming in with what they feel is the right intention, but they want all of these cool stuff, don't they? It's like somebody who's a materialist, right? They want all the fancy clothes, but they don't want to have to do the work to get there. Well, it's a little bit similar. When I say we're coming in egoically, we might be doing it because we want to gain these wonderful siddhis. And of course, that's exciting and fun, but it's just an accessory. This spiritual path is here to make you more real. And if we're, floating out in cloud nine because we've done loads of practices to open up the third eye, this isn't in balance and it's not real. We have to come back down to earth and do the groundbreaking stuff of getting into our nervous system, which in time will awaken all of the chakras together. Now, why is this important? Well, because it's a slow and gradual process, but anything that's worthwhile in this world takes time, takes a bit of graft, and especially if you've had a big awakening experience in your system, then you've got to come back down to earth, isn't it? And start again. Because unfortunately, the ego would have come back in, for most people's experience, and it's very hard to detect. Now, if we're coming at opening the third eye egoically, you're going to be severely disappointed because, frankly, it probably won't open. Life is very clever and it knows that it needs balanced humans on this planet. And so whilst it's probably possible to open the third eye and isolate it on its own, this is not the training that we would offer you, especially not in the yogic tradition. You might get some new age stuff that will offer you that, but is it going to be incredibly helpful for you? No, because it's just going to give you a certain set of abilities that you can then abuse. And if you do abuse them, that will it will lead to a fall from grace. See, we have to begin to realize that we're not the doer of this life. And in a sense, because we think that we are, we become separate, don't we, in our mind, in our identity. But our identity, our ego, isn't a real thing. It's just a psychological structure, and structures maybe even too much of a firm word to use for it. It's just a load of thoughts, isn't it, that we identify with, loads of attachments that we identify with. As we begin to recognize inside of ourselves that we're not the one really necessarily doing this life, because the mind, the ego, the one that thinks it's the doer, is just a structure of thinking held up by our energy, the more that we bring our energy back into our control, the more then it can spread out into the rest of the chakras, preferably all at the same time, although there does tend to be a good link with it starting from the bottom, Muladhara, and then Swadhisthana, then Manipur, then Anahat, then Vishuddhi, then Agya. So when our psychology is mature and we're really firing on all cylinders, third eye will begin to open. Now here's an important thing to note. There's not going to be necessarily an experience in a moment in time when you can say to yourself, my third eye is open. Because you might have an experience that goes, wow, or you might have a subtle vibration. And these things, though it's cool to recognize inside of ourselves that that means I'm starting to get energy or prana into this area, doesn't mean that we're fully blown open and awakened in this area. It's a gradual process, and whilst you might have an experience is temporary. It comes and goes. So there won't necessarily be a moment where you can say, oh wow, my third eye is completely awake. And if you say that to somebody that knows what they're talking about, you're going to look a little bit silly. So it's good to have some humility and just recognize the experience inside of ourselves and go, okay, cool. This means I'm doing the right work and some funky stuff is starting to happen. Equally, when we become very penetrative with our third eye abilities and we are able to see a little bit more of life inside of ourselves, then we don't want to begin claiming that these are my abilities, because it's not personal. It just means that we've opened enough into life and that life has come into us more. We're just more open to life. That's all it's about, really. They're not mine. I'm not a really cool guy because I can see things. And no. This is, again, ego, isn't it? And this is one of the biggest traps around this center that I begin to notice on lots of stuff that I see on TikTok. And perfectly fine. Everybody's welcome to their own opinion. But also we have to be quite discerning and see what's really real out there and what isn't. So whilst it's cool to recognize experiences are beginning to happen in this third eye center, that doesn't mean the third eye is completely open, and you probably won't ever have an experience that will be able to tell you that that's happened, because it will just be a temporary experience and it will recede again. Nonetheless, you will begin to develop more and more capacity for intuitiveness inside of the system, more and more extra sensory perceptions too, as you develop your energetic system inside of yourself. And again, that's fun, but it's not personal. They're not yours. We've just opened into life more, and then more of life has come into us, and that's powerful in itself. But as soon as I claim that these abilities are mine, I know I'm in ego, I'm in separation. And as soon as I start thinking that I'm better than other people because I have these cool abilities inside of myself, then again I'm in ego, because every single person on this planet has the potential for these abilities. They've just got to get the prana in the system, and so most of them don't. So it's not a game of identity politics, which we seemingly love to play in this spiritual field. It's just a game of how much prana do you have in your system, and you will know by the way that you feel. Thanks for watching this video. If you got this far, then I know you're interested in chakras, and so I've made another video that you'll be interested in here. This answers the question of why you don't feel your chakras permanently, why you have an experience just once and then it's temporary and leaves you. And you can watch that video here. Also, if you're interested in diving deeper into these subjects, we take the traditional route here with the yogic tradition. And if you want to take your first step in the yogic tradition, you can apply to do that down below. Oh, good. Lots of love. Namaste.